Christa Blümlinger from Vienna. She lives in Vienna and in Paris. She teaches in Vienna at the university and writes widely about film issues, also for the magazine Iris, which appears in France or it's edited in France and in America. I think we will listen to Christa Blümlinger and Katharina Gsöll-Pointner and then have the lunch break, not as it is indicated later. Okay, Christa Blümlinger.
Thank you. I would first like to thank the Architectural Association, especially Pascal Schöning, for this invitation. I'm very glad to be here. Perhaps I start with explaining a bit the title of my conference, which changed a bit, but perhaps it didn't go through the fax I sent there. I don't know. Because finally I called it Rows of Seats, Rows of Images. I want to speak about the cinematographic order, a specific time-space-related succession of images in relation to the spectator's position in a theater and in other more recent media environments. I will be talking about motion and stillness as significant phenomena, as well as on-screen and off-screen, in order to consider cinema in the age of electronic and digital culture. I will especially consider what some French critics and theorists call le défilement, which means the unfolding of images of the film strip. It's kind of material term. I will take various works as examples of aesthetic and theoretical position and concentrate on the question of how film and video makers reflect the transformation of film as an aesthetic object in the context of other medias. So my first question would be, what is cinema? Cinema, and I come back to some film studies references. Cinema, as Christian Metz has argued, is constituted not by presence, but a double absence. It absents bodies in space, the past presence of bodies in front of a camera, as well as images in time, a passing of time we are forever running after in perception. I would like to provide some keys to understanding cinema as an apparatus, a dispositif. Excuse me to use another French term, dispositif, which seems to me quite good to explain some ideas. So the notion of dispositif was defined by what was perhaps defined first by Foucault, but I refer to Anne-Marie Duguay, who is a French video theorist, and Jacques Aumont, as a certain articulation of the look and certain modes of involvement of the spectator. A dispositif, you could call it apparatus too, regulates the relation of a spectator with the image, with an image within a certain symbolic context. An apparatus implies a technical framework. A dispositif, or apparatus, can generate images, but it can also be the subject of a narrative representation on its own. So I'm interested here in the appearance of a dispositif, both as an architectural setting and as a subject of a film or video representation. And now I come back to the classical cinema situation, as it was, for instance, described by Pascal Bonitzer as vision bloquée, which means fixed vision. It means that the spectator is in a way tied to his seat. He's looking straight forward to the screen. He's stuck in his seat. This classical cinema dispositif is linked to the dominant mode of narration as it was constructed since the early years of the century. But, as we know now, early cinema wasn't always narrative cinema. early cinema was first a cinema of attractions. Tom Gunning, an American film scholar, explained cinema of attractions as a discontinuous mode of representation, showing attractions instead of telling stories. And I quote Tom Gunning: "Film appeared in the vaudeville, its primary place of exhibition, until around 1905, as one attraction on the vaudeville program, surrounded by a mass of unrelated acts as in a non-narrative and even nearly illogical succession of performances." This is very important. Even later in the Nickelodeons, these short films appeared in a variety format. So there were trick films, actualities, illustrated songs, cheap vaudeville acts, etc. In mentioning the historical link between the spectator's immobility and the movement of the images, I would also like to refer to Serge Danet, a French critic who died some years ago, and who wrote a text entitled Du défilement au défilé. Serge Danet wrote, "What we call the history of film is in fact the history of the domestication of the public, of its immobilization, which means motionless people became sensitive to the mobility of the world." So there is a special relationship between the immobile spectator and the movement of the images, and the functioning of what we call a narrative mode of representation. Theorists in the 70s like Jean-Louis Baudry discussed this dispositif within terms, for instance, of Plato's cave, where prisoners tied to the ground are forced to watch some objects or puppet shadows projected in front of them, but they never see the real world, and they even don't see the men who project the shadows. The French video artist Thierry Kunzel wrote some brilliant essays about the complex interplay between the cinematic apparatus, or dispositif, and the cinefying process. One of them is titled Le défilement. Kunzel's basic idea about the classical narrative representation mode is that the film projection is generated by the film strip. At the same time, the spectator denies the existence of this film strip, which is relegated to the unconscious so that he can participate in the projective work. This applies not only to the film strip itself, but to the whole cinematic apparatus, to the light, the noise of the projector, and so on. This relegation also applies to the formal structure of the fiction film itself. What defines the cinematic apparatus, unlike the performing arts, is the irreversible vanishing of the images. In a classical movie situation, a film cannot be stopped. Images and narration are just going on, usually for 90 minutes, and we are, like Plato's prisoners, more or less forced to watch them until the moment when the film has ended and we leave the movie theater. TV, video, computer, cyberspace, and the emerging digital culture have completely changed this situation, or this dispositif. And I come back again to Serge Danet, to this text Du défilement au défilé from 1989, who wrote about contemporary visual culture, especially on TV and publicity. And I quote Danet: "The movement is no longer in the images, but lies in the riddle of the power that has programmed them." One has to understand these words as a position of a critic who belonged to French cinephilia, a generation for whom movies before TV were linked to a certain, almost erratic movie theater experience. Danet's idea, formulated by the mid-80s, is that parts of contemporary cinema no longer remember any film history, but rather uses images like clichés. And in French, the word cliché has a double meaning. It means cliché and it means photo print. so still image. Moving images become still images because they are reproduced again and again in other media, for example as publicity images. The défilement would be now a défilé, a parade. That means the movement of the images in front of the motionless spectator has been transformed into the movement of the spectator in front of the clichés. Jean-Luc Godard showed in a rather unique way what this movement, the unfolding of a film, literally means and what it has become in the sense of Serge Danet. What Godard did in Ici et Ailleurs, a film which you know perhaps from '74, he develops in a film titled Grandeur et décadence d'un petit commerce de cinéma. The film, as Godard likes to show it, is a system of visible and invisible, of motion and stillness. And cinema is also a question of power. Only when we stop or slow down the film can we see its single images, its photograms. Film becomes then an arrested image, becomes photography. This basic unit of cinema is, as Godard said in Ici Ailleurs, the truth 24 times a second. Godard stops and slows down the movie in order to decompose and to understand the image. Of course, others did that before him, like Vertov in the 20s. But this meant in general a displacement of the desire, or scopic drive if you want, to the filmic object, whereas Godard is especially interested in the emotional effects of a projected film. I want to show now just an extract of Grandeur et décadence d'un petit commerce de cinéma from '86. Jean-Pierre Léaud, whom you hear his voice, you don't see him here, is a director, and he is organizing a casting. So please, tape number 1. Doesn't work. Yeah, it's come. Just so show 2 minutes.
Pas grand-chose, mais on n'éventre pas une femme comme ça.
Ensuite,
je pourrais toujours aller dire à ce flic que c'était jeudi et pas vendredi.
ensuite. Mais qu'est-ce que vous votez là, vous?
Son frère.
Ensuite.
Crève, fit-elle d'un air méprisant. Si tu n'es pas complètement dégoûté par la vie, suce-toi les doigts de pied.
Ensuite.
Sa main noire parmi du couteau, sa bêtise se rabattit dans un éclair.
Ensuite.
Ne vous inquiétez pas de savoir pourquoi je la veux. Je la veux, c'est tout. Voici l'argent. Encore une fois! Ne vous inquiétez pas de savoir pourquoi je la veux. Je la veux, c'est tout. Et voici l'argent.
Ensuite.
Foutre. Qu'est-ce que ça peut vous faire? Il est mort. C'est le seul homme que j'ai aimé, il est mort.
Encore une fois.
Mais qu'est-ce que ça peut vous faire? Il est mort, allez vous faire foutre. C'est le seul homme que j'ai aimé, il est mort.
Encore une fois.
Thank you. What is interesting about this sequence, it will be repeated in another way, an interesting way once again in this film, is that Godard took the idea of a series, a casting, a filing past, or défilé, and reflects on cinematographic images as well as the functioning of language and narration, the link between word and image. One image, one actor, one phrase. Linear sequencing is supposed to impart meaning. But here, the actors are not yet put into a narrative order. The phrases are mixed up and don't make sense while the film is going on. Only when Godard is re-examining one image, creating a time image, cutting off the sound, slowing down and freezing the images, does emotion emerge from the image. In a paradoxical way, desire results from a partial jamming of the défilement, a desire for fiction which has been displaced before by the serialization of the characters. What we see here is time as a series, in the sense of Gilles Deleuze, and I quote Deleuze, where the before and the after are no longer successive determinations of the course of time, but the two sides of a power, or the passage of the power to a higher power. Take the image of the crying woman who, I don't know if you don't understand French, she just says, I don't care, he already died, the man I loved died. He's already dead. This is cinema which is no longer interested in experience, but in what has remained from past experiences. It incorporates the before and the after into the body. It makes the unrolling of time, as Deleuze says, visible in terms of the body. These bodies are no longer part of a time-space continuum where action motivates the movement. We are confronted with the expressiveness of bodies, with gestures, and at the same time with the progress of projected bodies, which means, to use a Freudian metaphor, a Fortdarspiel, a going away, coming back. There is another way to decompose a film sequence. Another way than putting the film in a serial structure, which would be placing the images in a circular structure. But this also means changing the dispositif. I would like to illustrate this with a very intelligent installation made by Chantal Ackermann, d'Est au bord de la fiction. It was shown first in the Jeu de Paume in Paris, curated by Catherine David in 1995, I think. This is an installation created after the making of a film and research about the making of a film ex post facto. D'Est au bord de la fiction, or the title of the installation, consists of 3 rooms. The starting point is a film. It's Chantal Ackermann's film d'Est. She made it in 1993. And in the first room, you have a almost classical projection of this long feature film, with rows of seats, all facing the same direction, behind the seats a hidden projector, and in front a wide screen, and then the projector of the film. The film itself, if you don't know it, shows people in Eastern ex-communist countries standing in line, in queues somewhere public, or privately in their flats. The film consists mainly of fixed camera shots on the one hand and slow travelings on the other. Chantal Ackermann wrote about her film that she did not care about narrative continuity, but was interested in formal oppositions such as outside and inside, crowds and individuals, noise and silence. Then the installation consisted of a second room where you see 24 video monitors showing sequences from d'Est in 3-minute loops organized in threes like a series of triptychon. There are no seats, but rather rows of images. The film now dissolves into a number of simultaneous series which could not be watched within a cinema arrangement of this first room. Images circulate on different monitors and, unlike in the film, they are constantly repeated. The spectator now has to move, creating his own promenade. And each promenade will be, of course, different. In front of one of these triptychon, he or she is in a similar position to the filmmaker when she edited her film. Then there is a third room. It's a small room where is a single monitor with interference on it. We hear a voice. It's the voice of Chantal Ackermann, quoting the Bible and talking about writing and the religious relationship to the pictorial image, about the non-representable in history, and about the fact that the beginning of her filmmaking relies on writing. I would like to show you just on a tape, and it's a kind of amateur tape made by somebody in the museum staff, just the second room with the monitors, so that you have an idea of the space. Would you please show the second tape? Chantal Ackermann tries to decompose her own movie by multiple circular dispositions of the images. Harun Farocki, a Berlin filmmaker, analyzed his own film work within a binary structure. He did an installation called Interface or Schnittstelle in '95. It's an installation like Ackermann's piece, a self-referencing installation created by a filmmaker within a museum context. This is, I think, an interesting thing that when filmmakers do installations. In a kind of virtual editing place, the author-filmmaker analyzes images from the point of view of a filmmaker, considering himself as an engineer rather than a creator. Are scientific experiments conducted at the editing station, he asks? Interface challenges the spectator's memory and perception in two ways. The spectator is confronted with two parallel image tapes on two monitors like a video editor. I will show you here a version where the two images are integrated into one double image, as it was part in one of the installations. So you had the two parallel monitors, and in the second room you had one monitor with the two images integrated on one screen. And it was shown like this on German TV too. The parallel tapes are shown in a loop and can so be viewed by the spectators as often as they wish. This installation deals with binary principles of montage, as well as with abstractions produced by any machine-guided work with analogic images. Whether it's a mechanically cut film image or an electronically mixed video image, Farocki presents his editing as a laboratory experiment, as a form of becoming, in a Deleuzian sense, a work in progress. Interface is a space where two audiovisual rows are in dialogue with each other and confront the spectator with a mental rather than a physical promenade within a text that changes in order to its reading. Interface has an open form. Here we are confronted not with a real film, but rather with a virtual, with a possible film. The dialogical principle of the two tapes is complex. A cut is not only an articulation in one tape, or between two simultaneously shown images, or between sound and image, but a situation where images circulate within well-calculated series and are repeated in both image rows. The before and after, present and past, true and false, real and imaginary, become here undiscernible, and the interval, the in-between the images, becomes the center of this video installation. I just would like to show you an extract from the beginning, rather the beginning of the tape, the two tapes. So please, let's go on. Farocki interface.
So fing ich 1969 einen Film an. Eine Aussage vor dem Vietnam-Tribunal in Stockholm. Ich heiße Thai Binh Dan, bin vietnamesischer Nationalität, geboren 1949. Ich möchte hier die Verbrechen der amerikanischen Imperialisten, begangen an mir und meinem Dorf, anzeigen. Am 31. März 1966 gegen 16 Uhr hörte ich, als ich gerade das Geschirr abwusch, den Lärm von Flugzeugen. Ich stürzte zum Unterstand, aber kaum war ich durch die Tür, wurde ich von der ganz nahen Explosion einer Napalmbombe überrascht. Die Flammen umgaben mich von allen Seiten mit einer unerträglichen Hitze, dann wurde ich ohnmächtig. Das Napalm hat mich am Gesicht verbrannt, an beiden Armen und Beinen. Mein Haus wurde ebenfalls verbrannt. Nach 13 Tagen Bewusstlosigkeit erwachte ich in einem Bett eines Krankenhauses der FLN. Wie können wir Ihnen Napalm im Einsatz und wie können wir Ihnen Napalm-Verletzungen zeigen? Wenn wir Ihnen ein Bild von Napalm-Verletzungen zeigen, werden Sie die Augen verschließen. Zuerst werden Sie die Augen vor den Bildern verschließen. Dann werden Sie die Augen vor der Erinnerung daran verschließen. Dann werden Sie die Augen vor den Tatsachen verschließen. Dann werden Sie die Augen vor den Zusammenhängen verschließen. Wenn wir Ihnen einen Menschen mit Napalm-Verletzungen zeigen, werden wir Ihre Gefühle verletzen. Wenn wir Ihre Gefühle verletzen, dann kommt es Ihnen vor, als führten wir Napalm an Ihnen und auf Ihre Kosten vor. Wir können Ihnen nur eine schwache Vorstellung davon geben, wie Napalm wirkt. Eine Zigarette verbrennt mit etwa 400 Grad. Napalm verbrennt mit etwa 3000 Grad Hitze. Zwei Bilder, die eine Verbindung eingehen. Das kann der Ausgangspunkt zu einem Film sein. Am Ende seines Sprechens fügt sich der Autor selbst eine Verbrennung zu, allerdings nur an einem Punkt seiner Haut. Auch hier nur eine punktuelle Verbindung zur wirklichen Welt. Der Autor vergleicht sich mit einem der Tiere in den Forschungslabors. Er setzt also seinen Arbeitsplatz einem Labor gleich. Was am Schnittplatz geschieht, ist das einem wissenschaftlichen Versuch vergleichbar? An einem Schnittplatz werden da wissenschaftliche Experimente unternommen?
Thank you.
Nach dem
Just stop here. Thank you. The machinic arrangement in the Deleuzian sense of a mental or abstract machine. So the machinic arrangement of this montage process allows a kind of short circuit of time. The shot of the past as an element of a film is linked with the present act of rereading and reviewing. In the extract you just have seen, the double structure of the image is reflected by the sound. Farocki speaks here as an echo of a past sound which relates the optical image to the recollection images it recalls. And at the end of these layers, there's the spectator's virtual or future presence. She who is watching Farocki's interface is the one who is finally situated at the interface between perception, imagination, and memory. Now, I would also like to discuss the recollection image when it comes out of found footage, not as a revision of somebody's own film like Ackermann and Farocki did it. I would like to talk about Chris Marker, who has recently confronted the problem of the unfolding, the défilement, with its new implications in a very striking way. That an edictum that movement does not rely on the images anymore, but on the power of their programming. Marquet did that inside of a narrative world that belongs to cyberspace. Level 5 is a movie theater film which is itself a time machine. Marquet creates a multiplicity of circulating images within a kind of science fiction fabulation about cyberspace. And it's a film conceived as a kind of memory screen, conceived of as kind of memory screen. The question of level 5 is no longer, as in Sans Soleil, if you know the film, the right placement of an image, where to put an image. Neither does it concern the possibilities of electronic transformation of analog images. The question here relates to the circulation of images in a new digital sphere, which in itself implies new forms of recollection and oblivion or forgetting. In this jungle of visual surfaces, Marquet has been working and speaking as a lonely writer. From this point of view, he is very close to Alexandre Astruc's idea of the camera pencil, formulated in 1948, I think. He made this film almost like a home movie, together with an actress. Laura, the woman in the film, played by Catherine Belcaudia, finds images and meets people in a kind of cyberspace game. They all speak about places where memory is located, but also about the unrepresentable of the past. The subject of this research is an almost forgotten traumatic story of Okinawa, a small Japanese archipelago, where a battle at the end of the Second World War led into more civil than military victims. I will be a bit explicit about that because I have only a French tape which is not subtitled. A third of the population had followed the order to kill themselves rather than become prisoners. The strategy was intended to protect the main island, but finally led to the decision of the Americans in favor of using the atomic bomb. The found footage is in this film not only read and reviewed, but serves as a starting point for new associations, new questions, and a reconsideration of this computer research, which is at the same time real and fictitious. Marquet is here less interested in a défilé in front of clichés, which would be already known frozen images. He's more interested in looking for forgotten images. He goes as far as to mention the fact that there are no images and not even books about some indescribable moments in the history of Okinawa. And I'll show you just an extract of level 5 without subtitles about this story of the collective suicide. So tape number 4, please.
Parce qu'ils étaient serviables. Et aussi parce qu'ils voulaient faire ce qu'on attendait d'eux. Et aussi parce qu'ils voulaient faire mentir Napoléon. Ils se sont tués par milliers, par famille.
They killed themselves by thousands.
Avec une grenade, là où l'armée avait donné des grenades. Avec un bâton, quand il n'avait pas de grenade. Ou alors, en se jetant dans le vide, comme avant eux, les femmes de Saipan. J'avais déjà vu ces images. Au ralenti, on voit mieux cette femme qui se retourne, qui voit la caméra. Est-ce qu'on est sûr qu'elle aurait sauté si au dernier moment, elle n'avait pas compris qu'elle était vue? J'ai pensé à ce type de Paris 1900 qui essayait un invraisemblable saut avec un espèce de parachute de Batman au premier étage de la Tour Eiffel. Et on voit tellement, enfin moi je le vois, que au dernier moment, il comprend que son truc ne tient pas, qu'il va se tuer. Mais la caméra est là. Et il ne veut pas se dégonfler. Alors il saute. Et il se tue. La femme de Saipan a vu la caméra. Elle a compris que ces démons étrangers, non seulement la traquaient, mais qu'ils étaient capables de montrer à tout le monde qu'elle n'avait pas eu le courage de sauter. Elle a sauté. Et celui qui tenait la caméra et qui la visait comme un chasseur, à travers une lunette de visée, l'a abattue comme un chasseur.
Thank you. She continues her cyberspace journey. Slowing down, stopping, reframing, dissolving, overlapping, mixing and repeating images. The jamming of the défilement works here as a multiplying force. Chris Marker creates direct images of time, or what Gilles Deleuze calls a crystalline regime, where thought moves not as an expanding spatial image, but in time, a becoming rather than a being. The time image is an image of memory. I think we will hear about that concept later. Level 5 presents a rigorous dispositif. The woman's acting is determined by the tight framing of the video camera. Her body is exposed to the intimacy of the camera in the same way as the found footage or the newly shot images are exposed to digital arrangements. It's because this net woman is constantly appearing and disappearing, like the images and words she's looking for, that she's represented as a kind of Wiedergängerin, of ghost, of return or reincarnation of Hitchcock's Madeleine. It's funny that we just saw her from Vertigo, or of Preminger's Laura. Her name is Laura. These film historical references are in a film which rises above its own media categories and is ahead of its time. Finally, I want to show you a part of a video which has not been made by a European filmmaker, but by a very young American video artist, Christine Lucas. It perfectly represents an emergent visual sphere where the défilement, the unfolding, as we know it from classical cinema experience, is dislocated in a very different way. It means a complex play of different dispositifs in an almost dematerialized sphere. A play of images working simultaneously, the famous interfaces where the images themselves are in permanent virtual states of reappearance and new juxtapositions. It's a world also fed by clichés, as Danet already imagined, and it's talking about publicity. And I quote again Danet, "These clichés are inheriting the movie theater, even when they don't use the memory of film forms." It's a world of automatic bodies and automatic images that Christine Lucas shows us and is reflecting on. So I just would like to show you the beginning of this tape. It's a 6-minute tape, but I just show you 2 or 3 minutes. So the last tape, please, number 5. Cable Access with an X is the title of the tape from 1997. Christine Lucas.
Hi. Here's alright. Please like access card to proceed. Please like access card to proceed. Greetings. Guten Tag. Bonjour. Hi. Here's alright. Please like access card to proceed. Meetings. Bonjour. Hi. Cheese. Hola. Please swipe access card to proceed. Please swipe access card to proceed. Meetings. Guten Tag. Bonjour. Hi. Welcome. Please swipe access card and enter security data. What form of payment do you wish to apply this charge?
Can you just put it on my account, please?
Enter both year.
6-8.
Enter access code.
Okay. REW IMOK. Enter.
Once you preference.
Test 1, 2. Dairy free.
If you have
No
been
fish, no
convicted
fish.
of a felony,
Sorry?
please enter 1.
Sync? Sound sync.
If you would like to speak to a loan officer, parole officer, lawyer, or insurance broker, please enter 3. For parts replacement, enter 4. Travel schedules and reservations, enter 5. If you are in need of technical or spiritual advice, please remain on the line and assistant operator will be with you shortly.
Survey M, just checking in to say how you doing. All right. Okay.
10 years ago.
Caller, I love you. What can I do for you? Hi. I'm just kind of calling. I was, that power outage.
Sorry, you've got the wrong number. We don't do tune-up here.
No, I had a question, a technical question. It's, ever since that power outage that we had on Thursday, I've just been feeling kind of, just outside of myself, really kind of depressed about things, and things haven't been the same since. Hello? Yeah?
Thank you. We stop here.
Right.
There.
So she speaks to a kind of parole officer in the end, in the middle of the tape. And I think this is a tape that seems to correspond in a striking way to new urban theory, which suggests parallels between the phenomenon of the mall and current obsessions with surveillance, with the loss of public space, with cyberspace and special effects cinema. Placing the framework of its story, of course, it's only a fragment of a story. It's not a real a classical narration. Of the story in the street, she filmed it in Brooklyn. Cable access links the 19th century electrification of the public space with our emerging electronic civilization. This brings us back to Tom Gunning's concept of cinema of attractions from the beginning of this century. And I quote Tom Gunning again about the cinema of attractions. In other words, no narrative. A night in the variety theater was like a ride on a streetcar or an active day in a crowded city, according to this middle-class reform group, stimulating an unhealthy nervousness. Christine Lucas' tape represents an active day of the end of this century. Digital banking, video phone, surveillance cameras, TV, computer games, video jockey, therapy, video therapy, and so on. A very associative, non-logical succession of performances. There is no need for rows of theater seats. These performances are happening in the street or at home, and the rows of images are being permanently split up into new spheres. Maybe the specific cult jam of this tape expresses some resistance to this new cybernetic societies of control. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christa Blümlinger. I think before the lunch break, we listened to one more lecture by Dr. Katharina Gsöllpointner. She worked for years with the Ars Electronica Center in Linz, which is, as far as I know, or was the first electronic and art-related center in Europe. And yearly there's a festival, the Ars Electronica Festival, which is like a film festival but related to the electronic arts. Katharina. So.
Thank you, Pascal, and thank you to the AA for inviting me. Good morning or good afternoon already, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to speak about time and space as constituent moments of current art production in the media context. I'm afraid I have to abbreviate my talk a little bit, referring to the time. So maybe there are some topics which I cannot refer to, I would have done, but I'm sure in the afternoon in the discussion I can bring up them again. Digitalization, the electronic coding and decoding of information with the help of a binary code, as a process in time per se, makes computer-assisted art as an intervention in the perception and construction of reality. Media presence is created through memory. To actually come into being, artistic representation as a representation in time and space, like 4 dimensions, must first remove the boundaries between work and beholder with the help of an interface, which is the case in interactive art, that is to say, interactive media installations, CD-ROMs, or internet projects. In this context, the program is considered the prerequisite for thinking. Against this backdrop, the question arises to what extent such artistic production contributes to the construction of social reality, also in comparison with non-digital art. Is art, in the traditional sense, still relevant in view of these societal changes? And, given its aesthetic claims, how can it be part of the political field as a cultural factor? And what role plays popular culture in this field, like film, in this question of our sensation of time and space? Even the most cursory reply to these questions requires a comprehensive exploration of the artworks driven by this impulse and theoretical research. Of course, I won't be able to do this, to deal with all of this here. What I would like to do is present a few exemplary works from the artistic and cultural fields after a brief introduction to the topic. The works are interrelated in that they directly thematize the issue outlined above by the contribution to the construction of reality. You will also see that all of them in some way refer very much to cinematographic images and pictures. The need to redefine the notion of art has been discussed for quite some time. It was at least the discovery of postmodernism in the late 80s that called into question the continuation of modernism and consequently any notion of avant-garde. A return to the stylistic devices of classicism in architecture and design, neo-expressionist painting, the hype of international capital markets, followed by booming art markets in the industrialized countries, strengthens neo-conservative politics in Europe and the US, the romanticized fin de siècle feeling at the end of a millennium as a reason for dwindling social and moral responsibility, And finally, the increasing mediatization of social conditions, not only by TV, but even more by the advent of digital forms of communication. All these massive societal changes have been reasons for artists and theorists to increasingly rethink their own position and the function of the work within the system. As you know, post-structuralist ideas have become decisive in shaping the discourse on symbolism. Simulation in cyberspace are new notions introduced in theory, and I'm referring to the 80s now. With the rise of chaos theory and brain research, the natural sciences have made inroads to discussions within the liberal arts and art theory. Visual artists take cynical and ironic positions as they work with the aesthetic of the market. Critical artists scrutinize and question topics such as class, race, and gender. In the United States, AIDS and ACT UP began to engage with political as well as aesthetic and artistic dimensions. The so-called political correctness, albeit frequently misunderstood, became a must in literature, art, and theory. In the early 90s, cultural studies and gender research appeared on the scene as a logical consequence. Social and political topics formed the basis of many important artworks. At the same time, a kind of parallel universe of so-called electronic and computer art comes to the fore. Unlike the media of video, TV, and synthesizers used earlier, this kind of art celebrates its underpinnings in technology per se, or many of them. At first, mainly used in the acoustic field, computer-assisted art production continued to boom. Computer graphics and telecommunications were focal to artists' projects. At that point, we can already discern two main approaches on which the claims raised by the producers of this art converge. On the one hand, there was a critique of conditions and structures under the sway of the mass media or the media, or at least an attempt to identify these while taking into account the process-oriented potential of the new technologies. The internet, originally used by science, was suddenly linked with video, electronic sounds, and TV as a means of artistic expression. So-called telecommunication projects became ever more important. And this is what I, in general, would call some kind of critical position. On the other hand, there was a growing interest in technological potential of, a growing interest in the technological potential of personal computers, which primarily manifested itself in the graphic arts. Artists, assisted by the slowly emerging computer industry, played an ever more important role. However, most of them had more of a background in technology and natural sciences than in art. The claims and results of these works were accordingly poor. The euphoria emerging in this field, then yet undiscovered by art theory, eventually led to the emergence of programs for early computer animations, and eventually led up to the giant industry comprising movies, interactive TV, theme parks, and virtual reality of the early 90s. At the same time, virtual reality grew ever more important for applications in natural sciences, such as mathematics, biochemistry, genetic engineering, and so on. And this is what I would call this kind of affirmative position. Yeah, maybe I go on now. I leave something out. My question now is, but how do artists now respond to, firstly, the changed tools or media? That is to say, how do they respond to the new technologies? Secondly, how do they react to a mediatized flow of information and thus the need for a new aesthetic, transcending that of TV and mass media advertising, which we are influenced very much? Thirdly, how do they respond to the societal changes caused by the new technologies, like new definitions of work, issues of identity and difference, new constructions of reality, etc. Fourthly, how do they react to the mediatization of all subjective and collective texts, which is utterances? Fifthly, to the fact that any utterance made in terms of artistic practice is appropriated by the principles of the symbolic capital market. And sixthly, how do they finally cope with the rapid changes to built and structural environments? If we assume that the conventional constructs underlying notions such as time and space and their perception are at least subject to massive changes, if not made obsolete due to the use of new technologies, then we can explore works focusing on the following themes as examples: space, time, memory, perception, the flow of information, and the construction of reality. First and foremost, we will have to identify the relation in which a notion of art exists today, to the extent that there is an understanding about it when it is used in discourse. Let me approach this issue in a roundabout way, as it were by induction, in that I will analyze works that seem interesting to me before testing them for their relevancy to the questions posed early on. The works I find exciting in this context, or at least interesting, are characterized by a reference to the linkage, layering, overlapping, and interdependency of various media levels. Channel, zone of memory. Lev Manovich, born in Moscow, now teaching visual arts at the University of California in San Diego, said something along the following lines about interactive art. I quote, "All classical and, to an even greater extent, all modern art has been interactive since it required viewers or readers who would complete missing information. For example, ellipses in literary narratives, missing parts of an object in modern painting, and so on. And who had to move their eyes, like composition in painting and cinema, or whole bodies, like to perceive sculpture and architecture. So, interactive computer art takes the word interactive literally by equating it with purely physical interaction between a user and an artwork, pushing a button, to the detriment of psychic interaction. Lev Manovich, primarily referred to the totalitarian character of interactive art when he wrote, I quote again, "Mental processes of reflection, problem solving, remembering, and association are externalized and equated with the process of following links, going to a new screen, choosing a new scene or a new text. The actual principle of the new media, the links," and here he is referring, of course, to the internet. So the actual principle of the new media, the links, indeed objectifies the process of human thinking, which links ideas, images, and memories with one another. As regards site-specific interactive installations, I would like to refer to works by the Austrian artist Constanze Ruhm, since they deal with the problem of time, space, and constructions of reality in a highly complex way, and at the same time propose, in their representation, new categories of aesthetics. The artist includes the totalitarian character of the media environment, but at the same time, as she discloses the structure of the work, she facilitates reflections on it. Together with architect and artist Peter Sandbichler, Constanze Rum represented Austria at the Venice Biennial of 1996. Maybe some of you have seen this work. Along with the architects group Coop Himmelblau, which modified the Austrian pavilion by specific structural interventions, they attracted attention by the media installation they presented. The work, aptly titled Canal, which means channel in English, consisted of the combination and potential communication between real and virtual space. Above and across an archaically organic, cave-like tunnel structure built by Coop Himmelblau, Rum and Sandbichler placed a virtual tunnel structured as an endless knot intersecting with real architecture in 6 points. These 6 interfaces were visible to the visitors as 6 cinema-like projections inside the actual tunnel structure. The virtual tunnel was conceived as an endless loop in which viewers could move along fast. The walls or the skin was covered with TV images received directly via satellite. Thus, 3 worlds were interlinked. One was the built-up environment by Coop Himmelblau. The other was the virtual world of the computer-generated channel. And the third one was the media world of TV, which was actually what rendered the virtual tunnel visible and enabled the viewer to experience it. The 3 worlds, the built-up channel, the virtual tunnel channel, and the TV channels, related to one another, came into being through one another in their specificity and functioned as an artwork in their interdependency only. The individual components could never have worked that way. Moreover, the visitors were able to manipulate the virtual knot in terms of form, direction, and TV image texture with the help of a relatively simple remote control. In the dark, cavernous space, people experienced a ride through the reality of the media that was reminiscent of a theme park ride. The remarkable feature about it is that it was not only the channel structure that had to respond to users' directions in real time, but also the TV images received in real time. Their perspectival representation also had to be changed accordingly by the computer program. Can we see the first tape, please? So this is the Austrian pavilion at the Venice Biennial, which has been changed by Coop Himmelblau. And this was the tunnel structure, this part you could see here. You entered it and you could come out here again on this round, eggish shape. So here you can see a computer model of the of the built tunnel and the virtual knot which intersects with the tunnel, but I think there is something wrong with the tape. Is it? Hi. Okay, let it go on. It's coming better afterwards. virtual tunnel on the built structure. Okay, could you come, please? I'm sorry for the bad. Probably it's too light. I think I will stop this. Yeah, maybe this, leave it on a little bit. You can see just the distortion of the tunnel-like experience you are making when you watch the projections. This is the tunnel shape, and the skin of it is like the real-life TV images from the satellite. And as a visitor, you could direct with a remote control also the speed and the direction of the virtual tunnel. So you could really move in this virtual space. Okay, thank you. 1 year later, the two artists presented a similar project in New York City, placing such a virtual knot over part of Manhattan and playing video projections at the intersections. However, these were not generated in real time any longer. Still, this was a consistent further development of the concept of virtual space, even though the project was not so much about the virtuality of the computer image than the conceptual construct behind it. Constanze Rum's most recent works use an even more advanced version of the computer program, taking the viewer on a virtual trip through her own signature. At the same time, her most recent works approach the cinema as she uses stills from certain films, processing them digitally, and presenting them as an so-called easel painting created by means of a complicated printing technique. She selected François Truffaut's La Nuit Américaine from 1973. In English, I think it's Day for Night. A film moving on various narrative levels and thus several levels of reality. It is the story of a director who is working on a film, the production of which is the content of Truffaut's movie. The title refers to day for night shots and thus another level of fiction. This is combined with the level of the director's dreams, which is an important element of the film. Thus, a number of realities coexist and overlap, and the viewer of Truffaut's film is unable to discern which of them is actually the one that Truffaut's movie is about. The intersections of these realities are shown in the pictures which Constanze Rum represented as hard copies in her latest show. Can I have the slides now, please? Okay. Sorry for this logo down there. This is the company who did these very, very expensive plates. Yeah, it's very. So please be aware that the artwork. These are pictures of the artworks. The artworks are, of course, only these in the frame, which is which you can see. So forget about the logo of the company. What you see here is the, as I said before, the digitally printed out still of the movie La Nuit Américaine, and Constanze Rum choose it. It's called Clock. She chose it because this clock in the movie at the airport is always shown when one of the main characters, Alexandra, goes there every day to meet his lover, who actually never arrives, or only at the end of the film. So how do I go on with this? Forward? Yeah. The second picture is called Surdité. It is a motif from a dream Truffaut, who plays himself, the director in the movie, has every night. The viewer of the movie believes that the word written on the roof of the house in the dream is cinema. This is what Constanze Room proposes. But however, this is not the case. If you go to the still frames, it reveals that it is surdité. And surdité means deafness, which is the director's dream. Surdité? Can you tell me something more about this then? Okay, you will refer to this. And the director's dream and also his trauma, because he wears a hearing aid. This one is called Scaffold, as the title implies. It's a part of the decoration of the film, but it is, Constanze Room shows it without the actors in it. And also the fourth one, which shows a set, which depicts a set of the movie where an actress always keeps forgetting her lines. Okay, let me get to something new now, but I will come back later to this topic. It was against a different historical backdrop that the film Conceiving Ada, made in 1997 by American artist Lynn Hirschman, has to be considered. Ever since the 70s, Hirschman had used electronic media as a means to attain an artistic end. As early as in her first video disc project, Lorna, she referred to the reality of the media between fact and fiction. Using the loaded field between intimacy and publicity, thematizing the constructing male gaze and showing how the viewer of an artwork is caught. She created the cybernetic system as a psychologically compulsive situation. Her works Deep Contact in '89, Room of One's Own from '92, and America's Finest from 1995 deal with violence as a matter of occupying space. In her 1997 book on the pioneers of interactive art, German writer Sökle Dinkler wrote, I quote, Hirschman manages to dissociate the cybernetic circle, which is the functional basis of all interactive works, from a discussion that is exclusively oriented along the lines of media technology. Much like Paul Garin, she places interactive technology in the context of surveillance technologies. However, she directs a controlling male gaze, which accordingly to feminist theory is an expression of power back into herself, so that we can never be sure who controls and who is being controlled. In Conceiving Ada, which I'm sorry I cannot show you a part of, which would be very interesting, but I could not get a copy. But it will be released, as far as I know, very soon in Europe. And it has been shown at the Berlin Film Festival this, I think, February. In Conceiving Ada, which revolves around Ada Lovelace, the English mathematician, you know, who has developed the first programming language in the past century. So in this film, Lynn Hirschman continues in the tradition of her previous works, not only using new technologies, but also showing that new technologies actually make it possible to transcend time and space. A young woman scientist who has just become pregnant is writing a DNA computer program to be able to communicate with Ada Lovelace, who she admires. She succeeds and experiences sequences from Ada's life via computer. Finally, she even manages to communicate with her and wants to save her knowledge on disk. Ada rejects that and dies before the scientist's eyes. Having finished her project during the 9 months of pregnancy, the scientist gives birth to a girl who later turns out to have Ada Lovelace's memory. Apart from the parallel representation and dovetailing across time and space of the two women's lives, which are seen from a feminist perspective, another interesting element of the film is the visual realization of their communication, immanent to computer or software. The feedback from Ada's memory, which is reborn in the young scientist's daughter, creates an endless loop of time. So the next, what I'm talking about, I will call the time loop. This time loop, reminiscent of a Möbius strip, which was also what Constanze Ruhm presented in a very concrete term, or in very concrete terms in her work Not Project, which I introduced before. So this time loop is a significant part of many science fiction films, of course, which use the future perfect as a cinematic apparatus, as Christa Blümlinger has illustrated very well in an essay on the same title in 1995 already. For example, in Terminator, to name only the most important example, or one of the most important examples, James Cameron works with such a logical, non-existent anticipation of the future, as does Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, of course, where the replicants' artificial childhood memories are constructed as part of their identities, lending them credibility. For example, in Lost Highway, David Lynch showed us how well this time loop proves the absurdity of our time-space construction and construction of reality. There, the protagonist, looking for the unknown man who rang his doorbell in the beginning of the film, turns out to be identical with the visitor at the end. In another science fiction movie, in Robert Zemeckis's Contact from 1997, Jodie Foster travels through time and space in a machine, the construction plan of which was radioed in directly from outer space. The interesting thing in this movie for me was that the construction of how you could read this message, and it was made that the data had to be converted from a two-dimensional level into three dimensions to be legible. There is another popular movie which has been Sphere, or which is Sphere by Barry Levinson. And there the mathematician Harry also has to use a decoding key that cannot be used in a linear form, but has to be transferred onto an imaginary sphere in spirals for reading. Okay. Probably most of you or some of you have seen this movie. In this film, the crew of a deep sea habitat is suddenly confronted with a creature from outer space. A giant golden sphere floating in space with a pulsating and shiny surface that looks like a liquid reflecting its surroundings. Interestingly enough, the protagonists who stare at the sphere in disbelief are not reflected. At the end of the movie, we learn that the sphere is the power of making one's own dreams, memories, and imaginings come true. However, the protagonists only use the power to manifest their bad ideas. Knowing that, they decide to use the power they have been given by committing it to oblivion. Their last manifestation is one of disintegration. Thus, the logical consequence is that nobody will have known about their discovery in the future. In several scenes, the time loop is the key to solving the riddle of the spaceship they have found. By entering a black hole, an American spaceship has returned to a past which contributes to constituting its future flight and crash by deliberately committing itself to oblivion. Director Barry Levinson expresses this clearly as he does not use a narrative structure without transitional passages, but presents an episodic string of quasi-dreamlike sequences in which the boundary between imagination and reality is blurred. The art world. A person standing in an almost unbearable expanse, back turned to us, looks at a floating object. It is one of the digital photographs the Austrian artist Cel Covina developed in the past few years under the title Welt, which means virtual world, but also the fourth world, referring to the fourth dimension, of course. In doing so, he is concerned with juxtaposing the idea of a virtual world with its manifestations in pictures. Wiener's basic material consists of photographs of existing well-known artworks, such as Duchamp's large glass or here Picasso's paintings. With the help of a computer program, he transforms them into three-dimensional objects in the space of the picture that unfold before the viewer's eyes as so-called art worlds. In a commission for Minolta, Austria, he takes this one step further and transfers the person depicted into the virtual sphere-shaped object worlds, thus making them part of their own reality. Thus, he seems to bridge the distance between viewer and object, but he also uses the works for presentations on the company website, where they reappear as a detached artwork. This is in keeping with these earlier public artworks, which were then developed further via the public space of the media and the media-assisted processing of classical easel paintings made from digitalized basic material to the presentation of his work on the net as a public advertising space. The title of his series, Ärger auf dem Datenhighway, which means trouble on the information superhighway, reflects the ambivalence which he avoids in turn by making large-scale projects for public urban spaces, which are produced with the help of the so-called causality technique. I'm sure you know that it's computer-aided large-scale imaging. This is one project proposal. Now I come to my last topic, computer-aided nature. For many years, the Austro-German artists group Nobotic Research has engaged with the issue of how the net and local presence interact. Basically, their installations have always depended on the place of representation and the flow of digital data. Nobotic Research create so-called co-realities, that is to say second natures or parallel worlds. These realities exist but have not been perceived and depend on social, cultural and aesthetic components. Nobotic Research present them as an advanced CAN, which means computer-aided nature. And they say, I quote, this chimerical nature, unlike hermetically sealed virtual worlds, owes its existence to its linked effectiveness to the real and is subject to the same cultural conditioning as our perception of the so-called reference nature. It is open to economic exploitation and political power play, operates as a knowledge-generating source, offers the potential for aesthetic experience, and can itself become the object of scientific research. In the latest work, which is called Tendencies, Nobotic research used transcoded hypothetical processes and energy flows from the Tokyo district Shimbashi, again visualizing them on the net. Internet users worldwide were able to log on via a Java interface and to change the analysis of data. At the same time, the visitors to the actual exhibition in Tokyo were able to walk into a light and sound installation, the appearance of which changed with the data flows. Those who were present on site experienced changes but had no way of intervening. Those who were absent could not perceive the results of their manipulations. In this most recent work, which will also be shown in Sao Paulo and Berlin in a modified version, Nobotic research reflects on Félix Guattari's notion of the urban machine, proposing a reflective form of connective action that incorporates both virtual space and real-life society. The issue of the aesthetic processing of scientific data flows is at stake here. The question is, to what extent do artists succeed in using interactivity not only to create new theoretical notions of the picture, which is what art theorists call for, but also, or many art theorists call for, but also to suggest a new notion of artistic work as such. Nobotic research said, and this is how I want to stop my talk, they said, we should rather use the word translocalization instead of globalization. Translocal means that single local formations are distributed within larger geographical, economic, or cultural formations, conditioning one another. This is not an abstract global process. The individuals and organizations in the local spheres cooperate with the global nomadic agents of the communication networks, and the communication of the networks does not function without local knowledge. The project does not so much develop a topology of location, but a topology of interventions and actions. I would like to show you the second tape now, which starts with an older project of Nobotic research, and then shows you something about these tendencies, but I'm afraid this will be not very good quality again. I hope the older project will be presented well. So this is the one from '94. And it was an interactive, so-called interactive art installation on a ship in Hamburg. What you see here are visualizations of so-called sound agents. Each element shows one sound, one electronic sound. It represents sound information. And as a visitor, you could go into the installation with an interface, and you could move the sound agents by controlling them with a device. But you also had to be aware that you are not losing certain sounds or things, and you also had to be aware that they were reacting to yourself and to each other. So you had the impression of, or you had the experience of moving within a three-dimensional space of sound, which you could influence and which you could experience walking through it. The sounds were stored in a computer program, and they came from different people from all over the world. They were sent via telephone and via internet.
Not stupid, I may be. Not stupid, I may be. More or light. And on this interface in front of your eye, you could see the virtual space, which you saw before, the computer animated or represented agents. So you could move in the virtual visual space. Could you fast forward, please? So I'm not sure if the quality, this is the Tokyo project now, which I wanted to show you, but I'm afraid the quality is not so good. So, but you can see it's a similar representation of data flow on the screen. Just to give you a short glance. And the data is referred, of course, to real existing geographical points. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
We have the lunch break. I don't know, maybe we are around 2 o'clock back, that we are not running too late.